Welcome to Off the Record with me, Sanny Ntayombya. Every Friday, I bring a brand new perspective to the week's old headlines. So sit back, relax, and let's get that conversation going. But before we do, make sure you hit that follow button. And now, let's get into the very first headline. It's not every day that you get the chance to hear the liberation story told to you by probably one of Rwanda's best storytellers, General James Kabarebe. And then to listen to the main man himself, President Paul Kagame, share even more stories soon after? Whew, that's a pretty good day. Well, that was the opportunity I got on Tuesday. I was part of a team of about 20 other Rwandan social media influencers and content creators, which is what I am, that were given the opportunity to visit Mulindi, the headquarters of the RPF from 1992 to 1994. The icing on the cake? The tour was conducted by General Kabarebe himself. Standing right outside one of the buildings that housed the then RPF commander, Paul Kagame, he recounted the struggles that the young RPF fighters encountered as soon as they entered Rwanda in October 1st, 1990, challenging the might of the mighty juvenile Habyarimana regime. What grabbed my attention in particular was when he spoke about the coming of the then Major Paul Kagame and the confusion and desolation he found. According to Afande James, out of the about 500 soldiers that were still alive, only about 250 of them were without injury. So with only 250 soldiers, I could only imagine it would have been tempting for Major Kagame to call it quits and just go back to Uganda in humiliation. Perhaps President Kagame's experience with Museveni, who started his own bush war in 1981 with only 41 men and 27 guns, gave him hope. After all, Afande PC, as he's known, was among those 41 men who, after 5 years, took over Kampala, the Ugandan capital. He understood that an initially tiny force could actually defeat a much larger one, as long as the strategy was right and the purpose of the war was righteous. Afande Kabarebe recounted the battles to capture Byumba, the pain and cold of the Virunga Mountains, and the bravery and determination of the young RPF soldiers. He then walked us through the house where President Kagame lived, as well as the deep trench that was built for him in case the government soldiers had started shelling the headquarters. We then toured Arusha House, the small building where the RPF politicians, men like Patrick Mazimaka, Alexi Kanyerengwe, and Mzee Tito Rutaremara would sit down to discuss the RPF's demands during the famous Arusha peace talks that then led to the 1993 Arusha Peace Accords. As a history buff, I was in heaven. I could close my eyes and imagine the young men and women of the RPF sitting down together and imagining a new Rwanda, a Rwanda totally different from the one they were experiencing at the time. The day only got better when President Paul Kagame arrived and then started answering different questions from our group. Answering one of the questions, he literally pointed out the building he was in, watching the African Cup of Nations semifinals that had pitted Zambia against Mali, when at that moment, when he was watching the game, he was informed that President Habyarimana's plane had crashed. In fact, interestingly enough, he informed us that his oldest son, Ivan, was staying with him at that very time. One of the things that stood out for me was an answer he gave in response to a question about what gave him confidence that the RPF would win the war given the state of the troops he initially found. He said, and I quote, "There wasn't anything that assured us of victory other than our own hearts. Whether we won or lost, we had to fight for our truth. That was the foundation of everything that followed." I think that is my main takeaway from not only the president's address to us, but also the entire experience at Mulindi. when there is truth so obvious and so good, it's worth fighting for. In fact, not fighting for it is a disservice to not only yourself, but to everyone around you. And no matter the cost, the truth must be fought for. Victory will follow as surely as day follows night. Now, on the subject of truth and fighting for it, I have many issues with the latest UN Group of Experts report on the Democratic Republic of Congo. Released on the 4th of July, Rwanda's own Liberation Day, the document, written by 6 so-called experts, regurgitates many of the same accusations that were made 6 months before. Mind you, this group submits a report to the UN Security Council every 6 months, which is probably why you feel like you've heard all those accusations before in the news or on TV. In terms of accusations against Rwanda, the report accuses the RDF of actively supporting M23 and even carrying out its own missions in eastern DRC. Previously, the government of Rwanda has said that those accusations are unfounded. Unfortunately, in terms of media attention, the UN Group of Experts' accusations against Rwanda have taken up all the airtime, and not the fact that the DRC government is literally using cannibalistic militia called the Wazalendo to buttress their own armed forces. I call them cannibals because they are actually gory videos on social media showing members of these forces literally burning Tutsis alive and then proceeding to eat them. Disgusting. Those are the people fighting alongside the DRC government. In addition to the Wazalendo cannibals, the DRC government also has literal genocidaires in its ranks. Here, I'm talking about the FDLR, a bloodthirsty force that not only wants to return to Rwanda and recommence the Tutsi genocide, but also kills Tutsis in eastern DRC. In fact, let no one lie to you that the root cause of this entire conflict is minerals or anything else. The root cause of this entire conflict is the fact that former Congolese President Mobutu Sese Seko not only allowed the defeated Rwandan army and the Interahamwe, who had, may I remind you, killed over 1 million Rwandans in only 100 days, he allowed them to enter his country with all their guns and then proceeded to give them even more guns and other forms of support. And what did they do as a result? And when I say they, I mean these Interahamwe and Exfar. They turned on the Tutsis who had lived in North and South Kivu for millennia and started killing them. That's what happens when people have evil genocide ideology. So these targeted people, what did they do? They then fled the country. They fled their homes, abandoning their lands and their cattle. These are the people you will now see in Kigeme refugee camp in Nyamagabe and Kiziba refugee camp in Karongi. The FDLR has never been satisfied with just terrorizing Congolese. They want to bring that terror here. Mind you, it's not as if they haven't even tried. You probably don't remember this, but they attacked Kinigi in 2019, killing and maiming as they went. Thankfully, our security forces repulsed them, but it was a close call. Know the world-famous Bisate Lodge? Well, the FDLR infiltrators got uncomfortably close to that 5-star hotel. Imagine what would have happened to the guests and Rwanda's reputation as a safe tourist destination if the hotel was actually attacked and guests killed. Every single Western country would have released travel warnings, and our tourism industry, worth around $680 million today, would have never recovered. If you think that the FDLR is just a boogeyman, I suggest you listen to an interview I did on the long form podcast with Innocent Tuyobahe, an FDLR soldier who decided to leave these forces and return home earlier this year. He told me that not only did the FDLR believe that the Tutsis were curses from God that needed to be eradicated, he also told me, and he actually said this, that the DRC army was arming, feeding, and paying them. And let no one lie and say that the DRC government is supporting the FDLR because of M23. M23 did not exist in 1995, but even then, the government of the time supported the FDLR's forefathers in committing crimes against defenseless people. So, if indeed the RDF is in the DRC, then they have a damn good reason. As long as the murderous, genocidal FDLR horde have the capacity to harm Rwandans, it would be irresponsible of the RDF to wait for them to first cause chaos before we act. We've already seen what they'll do if given the chance. The FDLR and its genocide ideology are at the root of this conflict, and unless the Congolese clean house, I don't see peace returning to the East, no matter what the group of experts report. Now, as I had predicted last week, the new UK government, led by the Labour Party, has annulled the previous agreement that was signed between Britain and Rwanda concerning the challenge of illegal migration. That was within its right. But as I said last week, Rwanda will not return the money. And why should it? I mean, let us remember that had the Conservatives won the July 4th elections, flights from the UK to Kigali would have commenced almost immediately. That was the plan. So, today, the question I see being posed on local Twitter is, if Rwanda doesn't return the millions of pounds, what will the consequences to Rwanda be? Well, to be honest, probably nothing. I mean, Rwanda played its part, contractually speaking. So, will what? What's going to happen? So, will the British sue us in court? Will it blackmail us with cuts to development aid if we don't return the money? I don't see any of that happening. If they did do any of those two, it would send a terrible message to their international partners. The message would be, the agreement signed on behalf of the UK by one political party in power can be rescinded by another. And not only rescinded, but the other contracting party will also be punished for daring to sign a deal with a legitimate government of the UK. Given that countries like the UK like to wield aid like benevolent chiefs, I see the Labour government quickly moving on from this as they try to figure out how to best manage the Britain they now have to deal with. They can only flog for so long a dead horse, the dead horse that is the UK-Rwanda migrant partnership. They cannot be seen arguing over pennies, to them, not to us, obviously, with a poor country like Rwanda. It would be bad for the Labour brand. The Labour likes to think of themselves as the teddy bear of British politics, kind and sincere. So for all the worriers out there, relax. All will be well. And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you so much for making it to the very end. Remember to follow us on our social media and to make sure to check out our other podcast, The Long Form with Sanny Ntayombya. It comes out every Monday like clockwork. Hope to have you back next Friday. Have a great weekend.